Welcome to another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement. I'm here at the News Forum where all voices matter. Our monthly panel is back, and the times require their expert analysis. Join us as we discuss the aftermath of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and its impact on Canada and the world. And joining us as usual are the Honourable Joe Oliver. He's Canada's former Minister of Finance as well as Minister of Natural Resources, and Gary Marr, a former Alberta Cabinet Minister and diplomat in Washington, D.C. He's now head of the Canada West Foundation. Also subbing in for Sandra Pupatello is Rafal Rohozinski. He is a principal at SecDev Group and an expert on Russia and Ukraine. Welcome to everyone.
Thanks for having us.
First, obviously, the big elephant, or should I say Russian bear in the room, is the invasion of Ukraine. Let's go to our new guest, Mr. Rohozinski. Perhaps you can tell us what your take is at this particular moment in time on the invasion.
Well, look, I think we have to recognize one thing right away. There's the world before the 24th of February 2022, and there's a world after. Putin's decision to invade, although telegraphed, probably the most telegraphed invasion in our lifetime anyway, indicates a sharp break with any possibility to negotiate with Europe over a new security agreement that would in any way encompass accepting Ukraine as an independent and sovereign country. Now, there's a lot of things in that statement. And one thing I think that I would state right off the bat, that even with its enormous military presence and the might that it's brought to bear, it's pretty clear that in the first 5 days of this invasion, Putin has not achieved the objectives that he wanted. And by not achieving the objectives that he wanted, which was a political and decisive military victory over the Ukrainians, he's opened up vulnerabilities, both for himself at home, as well as for the international community, which now sits on the precipice of a potential even use of nuclear weapons, something we would have never conscioned even a month ago.
Joe Oliver, you've seen a lot of crises in your time as a federal cabinet minister. What's your take on everything?
Well, this crisis is, of course, very, very different because of the military and security implications. And, it's a humanitarian crisis as well as a geopolitical one. And my concern is that because Vladimir Putin has not achieved his immediate objectives, and as a result, after I think 3 days, got rid of his chief of defense staff, he can't afford to be seen to be losing. And to win, I guess he feels he's got to batter the Ukrainians into some degree of submission. I think unless he succeeds militarily, he's not going to achieve his ultimate objective of regime change and installing a puppet government in Kiev. But he has to come out looking, or at least pretending, that he's a winner, and it may be he's going to insist at least on the statelets on the east coast, and some commitment perhaps not to apply to join NATO.
And Gary Marr, you've got the last word on the first question. What's your take?
Well, I think the one thing that I take away from all of this is that it really focuses countries on the importance of energy security and national security that comes from energy security. And I think that for a decade or more, this seemed like a bit of an old-fashioned idea to talk about energy security. And as instead of talking about having resiliency in your energy supply, instead people have been talking about the decarbonization of energy. And as a result, there will be people who will, respond differently. There will be a group of people that say, well, we have to have fossil fuels. So they'll say, drill, baby, drill. There will be others that say, we have to move forward on renewable resources. And so get rid of fossil fuels and focus only on green energies. And then there will be another group that perhaps will take the middle road, where they'll say, it's important to deal with fossil fuels, continue to use them, but make sure that we deal with the emissions, right? Because energy is not the problem, it's emissions that are the problem. And so There will be at least three different sort of policy perspectives on how we move forward on energy.
We're going to have to leave it at that for the first segment. Gentlemen, we'll be back right after this break. So please stay with us. Joe Oliver, you were about to make a point before we took the break there. What were you going to say?
Yes, I wanted to follow up on Gary's comments. I think it's well past the time we have to get real about energy, about its critical role in the world, and about its geopolitical implications, and talk about facts and data and not unicorns. It's a national tragedy that we've left behind hundreds of billions of dollars of projects and have not built pipelines in order to export our oil and gas to overseas markets, because we can't get the resources to tidewater. And now we're confronted with a crisis in Europe, which we could have helped alleviate, because, Germany made a crucial strategic blunder when they decided to go off nuclear. Now they're in the position of having to import more Russian gas and coal. At the same time, they're importing nuclear generated energy from France. It's put Europe in a highly vulnerable position, which we could have helped out with if we had built Energy East, and interestingly enough, reduced net global GHG emissions, because recipient countries would be substituting coal for natural gas, which is one of the reasons that the United States has reduced their emissions so much. We also should have built Northern Gateway, and now we should definitely build Trans Mountain and open up the West to exports to Asia to achieve the same purpose: jobs, revenue to government, a decrease in net global emissions, national unity, national security, helping our allies. As I said in an article, the case is so overwhelming that it's inevitable that the loony left would be opposed to it.
Our guest, Rafal Rohozinski, you obviously are concerned about security, but our other panelists are talking about energy security. What's your take on it?
Well, I think I would agree with some of what our panelists were saying. I certainly was one that was very much wondering why the timing of Putin escalating the issue around Ukraine, seeing as in the last 6 months, there was really nothing that would have changed from the previous 3 years, except for several things. One was the ongoing refusal of the German government to license Nord Stream 2, which put that project at risk, which invariably Russia was counting on as part of its energy strategy for integration into Europe. And secondly was the bringing online of the Voice of Siberia pipeline, which brings natural gas from Siberia directly to China, and which now accounts for about 30% of Russian exports. So paradoxically, on one hand, I think, my thinking right up until January was that this was a big bluff on the part of Putin to really try to get an agreement on energy security and security in Europe, recognizing that he had an ace in his pocket with the pipeline to China as a way of taking some of the pressure off. Clearly, it hasn't gone that way. But I think now, with Russian gas off the market, including its exports of liquid natural gas, which it had increased steadily over the last year, it's going to really redraw the international and the global market for fuels, which is both an opportunity for Canada, but also a risk.
Gary Marr, does this mean that Keystone, it's like the undead, it continues to walk around? Is it a possibility again? Is that what they're saying in Alberta?
Well, I will say this, that, had President Biden been thinking about energy security, I don't think that he would have extinguished the presidential permit to put Keystone XL into play on the first day of his mandate. I think that it does make sense to revisit that project, and here's the reason why. Keystone XL would have carried about 830,000 barrels of oil a day into the United States. If you look, and we've talked about this before on this panel, at the US Department of Energy's Energy Information Administration, the amount of oil that had been brought in from Russia over the past few months was in the range of about 900,000 up to 1 million barrels of oil a day. Depending on the price, that means that you're spending between $40 and $50 million a day, or over $1 billion a month, from the United States to go into supporting the treasury of the Russian Federation.
We're just going to take another brief break, Gary. We'll come right back to you. Please stay with us. Gary Mara, please continue your thought.
Oh, just to conclude with this, is I don't think it's lost upon people in Washington that the displacement of Canadian oil in favor of Russian oil in the past months has probably made some people think twice about whether or not it was the right decision for President Biden to, by executive order, extinguish the presidential permit on Keystone XL pipeline.
How will this? We don't know how it's playing out. Rafal's made that point. Obviously, the kinetic activity of the military invasion is ongoing as we do our interviews here today. But I'd love to get your sense of the impact on inflation, on supply chains, on economic crises. Joe Oliver, we'll start with you. Today, when we were filming, the interest rates of the country went up by 1/4 point. What does this all mean?
Well, I mean, what the immediate impact on the energy market of the Russian invasion of Ukraine has been to boost oil prices. I don't know what they are today, but they hit
$111.
It's 111 now. Okay, well, there you go. And that's, normally, by itself, that's good for Canada because we are an exporter, although it's only basically to the United States, and we have to sell at a discount. So there again, we're leaving money on the table, some of which we wouldn't have to if we were exporting elsewhere. So we've got inflationary pressures from energy. The government had to start raising, or I should say the Bank of Canada had to start raising interest rates. It looks like there's going to be 4 to 6 increases depending on how much they increase each time. There's been some criticism that they and the Fed have waited a bit too long, and the concern is they could overreact and drive us into a depression, or I wouldn't say, sorry, not a depression, a recession. But it's sort of early days here, and we're going to see more increases in interest rates, which is going to hurt a segment of the population which doesn't have savings, but has to buy goods and services. We've all seen the price of housing balloon upward, and this is going to create a real hardship for many people and a political problem for the government in power. So we could have, as I said, alleviated that for others, but also for ourselves, because more money coming in would have helped us deal with the immense debt and interest rates, which are now going to go up as well. With $1.2 trillion debt and rising, with interest rates going up, clearly that annual burden is going to go up as well. So things are not looking that great. I mean, there's been a whiplash, and economic growth was fine, to compensate for the previous decline, and that was also part of the reason for the Bank of Canada moving. Supply chain issues are, one hopes, temporary, but with the huge amount of debt, the inflationary pressures are going to be, continuing, and the government shows no real inclination to tackle expenditures. So I worry about the intermediate and longer term.
Gary, we're going to go to you maybe after the break, but Rafal, Russia and supply chains, looks like they're being cut out of everything. Is that your assessment?
Yeah, but I'd just go back to something that Joe said. I'm not nearly as sanguine about the impact of this. We're really in uncharted territories. Right. In the last 20 years, we've seen an unprecedented integration of supply chains globally, and tearing Russia out of that right now not only impacts them, but it impacts us. Indeed. Everything from titanium to potash to other products that we've grown used to. The Russian wheat, for example, which is a major export after petrochemical products, that's going to change the structure of the global economy. And I think we need to be prepared for that, having significant shocks in areas that we just haven't yet anticipated. On the supply chain side, we have a couple of scenarios we have to take into consideration. One is that, okay, Russia wins in Ukraine. We all sort of huddle down into a new
Val, I'm going to cut you off. I'm sorry to do this. We're going to take another brief break, but hold that thought. We'll come right back to you. We're back here at Boom and Bust. Rafal, please continue your analysis.
Sure. So we're looking at a couple of scenarios, or at least we should be looking at a couple of scenarios that might happen in the near future. The first is that Russia wins in Ukraine, in which case we hunker down to a new Cold War and we have a controlled export of energy eventually that'll look a lot like what we had in the 1970s with energy coming on the market. But we also have other scenarios, including the fact that we may have chaos that emerges out of a potential failure of the Russian invasion and a retrenchment in Russia, and potentially also even political change in Russia. In all of this cyber dimension really runs pretty deep. Let's not forget that energy systems are the largest, most exposed infrastructure that we have on the planet, that are uniquely vulnerable to both physical as well as cyber attacks. An angry, wounded bear will use its means that it has, not just nuclear. And cyber is one of them. We've already seen how attacks against energy systems have crippled refineries in Saudi Arabia and elsewhere. And we can expect that this could create another black swan event in the energy market that we're just not anticipating at the moment.
Yes, you can win the war, but lose the peace. We know that. Gary Marr, what's lots to talk about when you hail from Alberta. You want to talk about oil and potash and the Alberta budget. So the floor is yours.
So just to go to something that both Joe and Rafal talked about, and that is potash. The sanctions that are being placed on Russia are also being placed on Belarus. Right. And Belarus is a large producer of potash. So the prices of potash will go up. So if you're a potash producer in Saskatchewan, that's a good news story. But if you're a farmer relying on fertilizer that needs potash, that's not a good news story. And so there will be some changes or increase in costs of groceries as the price of fuel goes up and as the price of potash goes up because of the use of both of those on farms and the ability to take the products that are there and process and deliver them to your local grocery store. So my prediction is that in 2022, the most expensive four-wheeled vehicle in Canada will be a Costco shopping cart. Now, on the Alberta government's budget, I think it's notable. One of the key messages in that, while the budget is projected to be balanced, it is not simply the case that increased resource revenues are the reason for it. If the government of Alberta had stuck with its track of 4% increases of expenditures, then even with the increase in resource revenues, they would have still have been in a deficit budget situation. So it did require fiscal discipline on the part of the Alberta government in order to bring the budget back to being balanced. And I think that's probably a prudent thing for the Alberta government to move down that road. So it's not simply the good luck or the windfall associated with revenues. It's also been because there's been fiscal discipline exercised by the Alberta government.
Joe Oliver, we've got about a minute left. Are you satisfied that Canada has acted decisively in the wake of the Ukraine crisis?
I think there's a lot more that Canada could do. I noticed that apparently we're sending a lot of military supplies over, but we're not I don't think sending anti-tank missiles, and we're not sending planes over. We could do more in terms of medical supplies. We've got to try to alleviate the humanitarian crisis and let people into the country, as we did with Hungary in 1956. But there is more we can do to help them at this really crucial stage. I mean, they can't beat Russia, but if they hold them off long enough, the pain on the other side could force Putin to some kind of settlement. He needs a face saver, but his leverage is going to increase the more control of the country he has, and we should be doing things in a very robust way to maximize their defense capability, which
Right.
the Europeans are starting to do.
I'm afraid our time is up. Gentlemen, I want to thank all of you, including our guest, Rafal Rohozinski, for being part of this program. I suspect we might be talking about it on the panel next month as well. Thanks for joining us. Lots of moving parts with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, including oil and potash and budgets and inflation and interest rates. We'll be covering this story, of course, every day. Thanks for joining us.